Okay, welcome to COMP1004, Rapid Application Development here at Georgian College. At the fall 2016 semester, week one, part one of our broadcast, we're talking about setting up the environment today. But at first, what I'd like you to do is a couple things. We talked about Slack as a communication tool, and I have it here as an app. I have several channels. This is the one for you, as an example. When you join Slack, I'm going to have a series of people in the team. That will be here. Right now, it's just me. Please join Slack, COMP1004. Where do you get Slack? You go to slack.com. And then what you want to do is you want to join a team. So first of all, what you want to do is you can create your team, a team of on your own. Or if your team already uses Slack, you sign in or you find your team. If I click Find My Team, well, after you sign in, you can find the team that you want. Your team is COMP1004 Fall 2016. And then when you do that, you'll have access to Slack online, or you can download the Slack app. And the way to do that, of course, is download Slack, right? If I want to download Slack, you can go to Download App Slack, and then you can download it for Mac, Windows, or Linux, which is pretty cool. I highly recommend if you have an Android or iOS device, you can also download it for there as well. Why? Because you're going to get instant updates from me, changes, stuff we talked about in class, any kind of announcements. I will also use Blackboard only for people who decide not to join Slack for whatever reason, because I'm not going to make it fully required, although I'm going to communicate mostly on there. So it's up to you. So please download and install Slack and join the team. One great thing about Slack is, and a lot of companies are using it these days, again, this is an ancillary technology we're going to be talking about this semester. They use it because it's a great communication tool that we use in modern teams and in the real world, right? So that's why I'm introducing it to you today. Going forward at Georgian, we're going to continue to use Slack and other tools like this, even though they're not directly related to the course material that we're teaching. There's additional tool set. So please download and install Slack and join the team. It's called COMP1004, so capital C-O-M-P. Let me see if I can get there. COMP1004, and it's fall F2016, right? That's the team name. Now you should be able to join as long as you have a Georgian College email, right? So if it doesn't allow you to join, please let me know, and then what I'll do is I'll make it available for you guys. So I'll ask one person to join, and then I'll make the invitation available to all. So try it out now. As you join, you see instant messaging here. Again, from a Slack perspective, you can see that when someone joins or has any kind of communications, this is a communication tool. Why else do I use Slack? If you're working from home one day, so let's say, for example, you can't make it in on a day that we're doing a lecture or lab, and you have to work from home, there's some kind of problem. Maybe, I don't know, as we get towards, deeper into the fall and winter, it starts to snow. I can't imagine it today with the crazy weather we've been having. But let's just say you can't make it in for whatever reason. You can certainly, send me a Slack message saying, Tom, I can't make it in today. I'm going to be watching remotely. And if you watch remotely at the same time frame, like we're doing right now, between 4 and 7, right? Then you can certainly participate by asking questions through Slack, right? So that's another way we're going to be using it. Okay. So again, please join Slack and download the tool. Okay, another tool we're going to be using, and it's part of your first lab for today, is GitHub, right? So who has a Git account or a GitHub? Some of you did. If you were in my course before, then you probably have GitHub. That's great. All you're going to do is when we go through Visual Studio, we're going to be creating a Git repo up on GitHub, and the first lab that you have for 2%, so I'm paying you for 2%, is you're going to upload today's lesson up on GitHub. That's all you're going to do. That's lab 1, right? Which proves to me that you have a GitHub account, okay? So again, for GitHub, the one that I'm using, of course, is Georgian College, this one here. So all my lessons and everything else, all the code examples we're going to have is here up on github.com/Georgian College, right? So that's where you're going to go for all your examples, your code examples, right here. Okay, but please, if you haven't signed up for GitHub, or if you've never seen GitHub, you don't know what GitHub is, we're going to talk about it today and how to integrate it with Visual Studio. Okay, we're talking about tools. Let's talk about Visual Studio, which you need, right? So how do I get Visual Studio, and what version do I get? you're going to go to e5onthehub.com, which is your Georgian College link for DreamSpark. They've renamed DreamSpark to Microsoft Imagine this year. Actually, it just happened this semester. So if you see Microsoft Imagine, then that's what it's called. All right, it used to be called DreamSpark. Okay, so here it is. It's Visual Studio 2015. So if I was to go to this site, and if you really want the link, let's grab this link, and I'll put it up on Blackboard for you. So I'll create a new link here for Microsoft Imagine, right? That's what it is, and here's the link. So that way you have what I have, right? So you can go to Microsoft Imagine, that's the link for it, and it'll take you, it's specifically for Georgian College, right? So when you log in, you'll see that, like right now I'm not signed in, you can sign in, you can get your sign-in credentials from CS Tech, if I'm not wrong. That's Greg, if you send an email to him. And if you don't have his email, if you don't know what I'm talking about, see me after or send me a Slack message and I'll give you the information. But for now, you don't have to sign in. You only have to sign in when you actually download your Visual Studio 2015. So here's Visual Studio 2015. There's lots of versions. The one you want, right, if you skip down here, is Visual Studio Enterprise 2015 with Update 3. Okay, that's the one you want. So if you don't have this one, please, this is required for you to download and install. You may want to do this at home because Visual Studio 2015 with Update 3 takes about an hour and a bit to download fully. I recommend downloading the whole thing if you've got room. Download Xamarin. Don't unclick anything. Download the whole package. It's about 30 gig, right? This way you won't miss anything, right? If you download or if you don't check on some stuff, or if you go through and do your own kind of a default installation, there might be pieces missing that you'll have to add on later on. So I fully recommend download Visual Studio Enterprise 2015 with Update 3 fully by clicking it all, going to custom download. And the way, of course, to download this and to get your keys is clicking Add to Cart. And then from here, it's going to give you instructions on the key for Visual Studio 2015, how you install that key, and so on. Okay, and a link on how to download everything. So you're going to need this tool. The other tool that I recommend, other than just Visual Studio 2015 with Update 3, which we're going to probably use later on, if you search for SQL, I go SQL Server. I want to use SQL Server Management Studio. We might need that later on in the course. And if you skip down to SQL, if you just search for SQL, and you want to download SQL Server 2014 Management Studio with Service Pack 1. Why? Because later on in the course, and as you see, I'm going to show you the syllabus in a second, we're going to be using databases and a data connection with Visual Studio to create Windows forms. That's what we're going to be doing. So you really need to download and install this software for kind of an optimal effect. You really don't have to do it. I recommend it. And the reason why you don't have to is because you can do a lot of it with Visual Studio. The IDE itself has a link or the ability for you to connect to a database, no problem. Okay? So this is SQL Server 2014 Management Studio. Again, it's free download if you have access to DreamSpark, and of course, all of you do. Okay, so that's tool number 2. So if you have those two tools, and does anyone not have Visual Studio installed on their machine right now? Right? So if you don't have it, and again, this is because you guys, it's kind of a bring your own device environment, that's okay. Remember, I'm going to record the class today, so anything that you've missed, you can certainly watch, and then watch it again later if you want later on. Okay? So it's okay. It's not required for today. We're going to build something today. I'm going to talk about things today, but the stuff that you need to do is going to be due tomorrow night at midnight. So your lab 1 due tomorrow night at midnight is only for you to put up your lesson 1 that we're going to build today together up on GitHub. All right, so how do I connect to it? Again, I'm using a Mac. We're going to bring up Bootcamp. I'm going to restart my Bootcamp connection. Let's see if it actually works. And maybe it won't, because it hasn't detected my plugging in, has it? It did. And bear with me while we do that. I love when things don't work out exactly as they should. Let's start this up. There we go. Okay, so I've actually created a bootcamp partition, right? But instead of making it locally on my machine, just to show you what I've been doing, I've actually created it physically on my external SSD, right? So it's a terabyte SSD that I've connected to a USB 3 port. I could have done a Thunderbolt port, but the problem with that is it's about, just for the enclosure, it's about $500. To me, it doesn't make any sense, right? So I figured for $400, you get a terabyte SSD, and then we can use it like it's a Windows machine, right? Is it a Windows machine? Not exactly. So there might be slight glitches between what I'm going to show you and what you're going to see. Like, for example, it's doing updates. And of course, yesterday, it didn't require them. Let's just finish what this is doing. But please spin up your Windows machine. If you're using a Mac, spin up your partition. I know some people are using a Mac in the room. That's okay. Because we're going to do everything we're going to do this semester is with Windows, right, in Visual Studio 2015. Any questions so far? Because I want to talk about the syllabus in a second, but I want to kind of show you the tool and everything else. About rapid application development, so this course, right? Market for Windows Forms, even though it's a slightly older technology, just like ASP.NET Web Forms, which is the sister product if you're doing the web. It's deployed in 80% of government installations, right? They still use this old Windows Form stuff. They don't use WPF as much, so Windows Presentation Foundation. And they don't use the Universal Windows platform as much yet. It's just something fairly new. This Windows Forms, and once you learn how to use Windows Forms, the great thing is the same learnings that we take away from Windows Forms, you can apply to things like Android development or iOS development or any other kind of mobile development. And I'm going to kind of take that bent to it. When we talk about stuff when we create Windows Forms, I'm going to keep it in mind that it's almost like we're creating an app. Okay, so I want you to think about that as we do this new Windows application. So I got Visual Studio here installed, and again, Visual Studio 2015 Enterprise Edition. We're going to be touring the Visual Studio IDE and the interface. That's part of what we're going to be doing today. And also, we're going to build a very simple web form, a very simple app with Visual Studio. That's the other thing we're going to be doing today. I'm also going to be talking about GitHub from a different stance. You guys are taking database or some kind of project management this semester, no? You're going to be learning agile methodologies. Who's your professor for agile this semester? Is it Jarrett? Great. So when I spoke to Jarrett today, I said to him, look, what we're going to be using is GitHub to help us manage our user stories. Now, you guys don't know anything about user stories, no? You guys are learning agile now? So one of the things we do is when we build something, we create a user story, and I almost like a scenario for how we use the app that we're going to build. So let's say, for example, I want to build an app, which is, and we're going to do this later on, our body mass index application that we're going to create, right? So we're going to build a body mass index app or BMI app, right? So when you think about it, there's several things we can do with this app, and we kind of, when we talk about user story, we say, as a user, I should be able to enter my weight and my height, right? I can give you specific information. I can say, well, put a button here, and I can tell you to put a label or a text box or whatever, those kind of controls on the form. But the more modern methodology is, when you get your business requirements is, hey, this is what I want to do with the app, right? How would you make this app work knowing that the tools that you know, right? And there's going to be subtasks in order for us to make that app. For example, I'm going to create the user interface. That might be the first task I do, right? That task, work breakdown structure, can be divided into something we call a milestone. GitHub actually allows us to do that. It allows us to create and track issues. So we're going to be talking about that a lot during this semester. We're going to start slow. So today it's just going to be, let's create a GitHub account. Let's put our lesson 1 on GitHub. And then slowly, what we're going to be doing is, as I'm going to be demonstrating to you, is how to use GitHub for issue tracking. So it's another thing we're going to be doing as a side technology that we're going to be learning as we go. Okay, so this is your Visual Studio 2015 application. We're going to get back to this in a sec. So Windows, Mac. Okay. let me bring up the syllabus. And the syllabus I will put up later on today up on the up on Blackboard. Minor changes still have to be done with it because of specific details. And it's going to be very similar if you've if your friends are taking Andrew's course or section 3 and 4, that's what they're called, even though there's only 3 sections. Mine's section 5 for whatever reason. If you look at them, by the way, it's not E208. That's where I was before I came here because that's what my schedule said, but it's incorrect. So we're going to be using this book called Murex C# 2015. And it's a fairly new book. That's a good thing. It uses Visual Studio 2015. It's not a free download, unfortunately. You have to buy the book. I believe it's available in the bookstore if you wanted to buy it. It's a good book. Huh? It's not available in the bookstore? You have it on USB. Like I said, it's not a free download. I didn't say you can't get it, right? So it's up to you. You should get the book. How about this? How about I rephrase? Get the book, right? I think it's a great resource. There's a lot of detail. Murex books they're fairly detailed. They take a project-based approach when it comes to learning stuff, tools, and so on. I think it's there's a good set of books here, and it's not a necessarily a there's some books that are completely unnecessary. Like if you were doing the web, and for me to recommend a book for the web, it's like the web will go stale after 3 months. So it's kind of hard to recommend a book for the web. Excuse me, for the web. I don't recommend that. But for C#, because it doesn't change all that much, and Visual Studio, I think Murex book is a pretty good book. And if you want to know where that is, if I go to Murex, right? Here's Murex books. This is the website for it. This is the ASP.NET version. It's not that we need. It's the one that says Visual Studio or C#. C# 2015. This is the book. Okay. So it's not crazy expensive if you were going to buy it. Again, this is the online price. It's a fairly big book, 884 pages and 26 chapters. Obviously, we can't go through every single chapter in the book, but I will be following chapter by chapter, so you will have a structure for how you'll be flowing from one lesson to the other. For example, for today, we're only covering chapter 1. Why? I could have probably done chapter 2 today too, because today's an intro, and today you don't have your tools, and today you don't have your, half your stuff isn't set up properly. So it's not fair for me to go through chapter 1 and 2, and then you don't have all the tool sets. You'll miss a lot, and I really do believe in you learn by doing, right? So right now, for some of you, you won't be able to follow along, which is a negative thing. So this is where you would get the book. I mean, you can certainly get it from the bookstore. You can order from directly from these people. But again, I recommend you get the book. Table of contents, it shows you the stuff that we're going to be teaching. And like I said, today we're only going to be talking about chapter 1. Next week it's chapters 2 and 3, and I'm going to talk about this in a second. And pretty much every week is going to be a couple of chapters, right? So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, like that. And it's going to cover different parts. So one is Introduction to Visual Studio and the .NET Framework, which is the first couple of weeks. And then we're going to get right into the C# programming language. Now, this is the thing. The thing is, you've already know Java, right? So for me to talk about variables and arrays and loops and all that kind of stuff, again, if you know Java, you kind of know C#. We're just going to be talking about syntax. Yeah. And is yours my.georgianscollege.ca? Okay, hold on. This is a good thing. So let me just invite you. And as soon as I do that, I think I'll be able to invite everybody. So let's just do invite people. And here, come on up. Come on up. Yeah, instead of me typing in your email address and all that kind of stuff. You know your email address from Georgia? Put it on in, right? And I apologize for the keyboard condom. So you're going to type at my.georgian or student. Is that what it is? Okay, and let's put your first name in there at least, and then you can decide whether you want to operate with your first name or not. So when you set up your thing, cool, thanks. And now what we're going to do is when I click on invite one person, it's going to say, hey, anyone from student.georgian.on.ca, then we'll set that up. Good. Try Georgian C. If you're from georgianc.on.ca, student.georgianc.on.ca, it'll work. Yes.
I don't have it.
What do you have? You won't get an invitation. You have to sign up on your own. So you sign up on your own. So go to that Slack channel and sign up on your own.
But it says I'm not in any team.
I just added you in. So if you have an email address, the student.georgianc.on.ca, you'll be able to do it. Okay, go ahead. It's your password. You set up the password, not me. Yeah, that's your password. And she put in your email address and your password, and then it'll give you your thing.
Password for my email address?
No, the password that you're going to use for Slack. Okay. Thank you for that. All right. So I've got one joiner here, and again, from a team directory perspective, if I go back to COMP1004, it doesn't allow you. Okay, create an account. There you go, create an account. So if I go to team directory, you can see the people that have joined already. There they are. And again, you can send direct messages to each other as well as to the team. If you go to the general channel, then you can send a broadcast to everybody. Please don't broadcast random thoughts to everybody on the general channel, right? Save that for random. There's a random channel. There's also a developer channel that I created for any kind of code samples you want to share with other people. Like, for example, let's say if you've got a solution to a problem that I'm talking about, you can certainly share it on the developer channel. Okay, yes? Update 3. So Visual Studio 2015 Enterprise was update 3, and that's a good start. Okay, I'm seeing some other people come in here now. Okay, cool. Thank you for that, by the way, Logan. I already owe you one. All right, there we go. Okay, so every other week, every week pretty much we're going to be talking about these chapters, but this is where you can get the details for the book. Again, it gives you also sub details for each of the chapters for some of the things we're going to be talking about, the topics of discussion. Let's get back to that this thing, which is our outline, if you will. So again, today it's just an intro to Visual Studio and Visual C#. We're going to be talking about that a little bit. I'm going to do a little bit of that this week anyway, right? Because I can't really demo something without something to show you, right? So I can't just talk about the Visual Studio IDE and then see you later. That's all we're talking about today. Because then our class will be very short. And in about an hour or so, we'll say sayonara, right? You're going to go home. So I want to give you some other stuff to show you. And of course, we need to build something for our lab number 1 so we can finish our lab. Now, if you've got Visual Studio 2015 with update 3 installed, you can finish the lab today and deploy today. It's not a big deal. Okay, so again, this week is set up. Next week, we're going to be talking about simple form controls, right? And we're going to be talking about how to, again, covering chapter 2 and 3 of the book, design, code, and test simple Windows form applications. You're also going to get assignment number 1 next week. Yes? Say that again? There are alternatives, but I don't recommend them. For example, Visual Studio, if you download Xamarin Studio on, for example, but I would not recommend it. I'm just telling you, you could do this. I don't recommend it. It doesn't give you all the tool sets you need for what we're going to do in this course. However, they are going to be making it so that you can use Xamarin Studio for cross-platform development. So let's say you want to make Windows applications, or when you want to make Android applications or iOS applications and you have a Mac. As an example, let's just say you can download Xamarin Studio, and pretty much most of the stuff that we're doing in this course you can do on a Mac, right? However, that being said, right, I really recommend, highly recommend you use Visual Studio 2015 with update 3 so that we're on the same playing field. Otherwise, I'm going to be talking one thing and you're going to be doing something else. Yes? Don't worry, it's not urgent. We'll do it together. What is your email address? Is it an on.ca email address, like georgiancollege.on.ca? Dan, can you give him a hand? Thank you, sir. Okay, so let's go on like this, and let's talk about this from a week schedule perspective. So again, week 3, 4, 5, and 6 before the midterm, we're going to be talking about C# essentials, which is going to be covering chapters 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, right, from the book. Here's the funny thing about C#. You kind of already know a lot about it, even though you may have never programmed in C# before. Because you've done Java, you've already done Java, you know object-oriented programming from some perspective, yeah? So therefore, for me to reteach you object-oriented programming concepts again, it's not going to happen. I'm going to talk about them, and I'm going to be talking about how to use the syntax in C#, which is a little bit different than Java, and especially since we're using a different IDE, a different environment to do that, different editor. That's the stuff I'm going to be talking about over the next several weeks after week 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. 7, we're going to do our midterm test. My midterm test is going to be purely practical. It's going to be geared for about an hour and a half, which is about 90 minutes. Some people will finish in an hour and a half. Some people will take the whole time. And the reason why I'm not doing any multiple choice true false is because notice that on the syllabus here, next week, you're going to get a quiz number 1. Here's what I'm not going to do this semester, which I did for the last several semesters now. I used to do quizzes in class, which is like you do a quiz and you come in the morning and you do the quiz, and then you lock things down and you can't look at anything and blah, blah, blah. It's not going to happen this semester. It's going to be a take-home quiz. So I'm going to get you to do it. You have a day to do it, or that night. You take it home. You do it whenever you feel like it. As soon as I open it up, you'll have 5 or 6 questions to do, and you get 2% if you finish your quiz. Why? Because the real gist of the quiz is that you get the concepts. That's what I'm going to be talking about, the concepts on the quiz, and it's going to cover the stuff we talk about today. So if I talk about the .NET framework, if I talk about C#, if I talk about Visual Studio, if I talk about GitHub, anything that I talk about today is fair game for 5 or 6 questions on a quiz that I'm going to put together for you next week that'll be due. It's going to be a take-home quiz you do on your own. People are going to say, well, wait a minute, I can cheat, right? I can talk to my buddy. I can do the quiz with him. Great. Cheat. You're going to cheat yourself at the end, right? And for me, it's not just about marks. It can equate to 10% of your final grade. I guarantee you there will be people that will not complete the quiz, even though it's a take-home quiz and fully open book. It will happen, right? Here's what I'm going to do, though. So I can't be strict on that side because I don't believe in that. But I will be strict on the time frame. So if you don't get it done the same day, 0. So you have all night to do it, any time for that day until the night to do it, to take care of the quiz. It's going to be 6 questions. It probably will take you no more than about 10 minutes. If you can't do 10 minutes of homework that night, 0. There's not going to be like a takeover. There won't be excuses about being sick. It's not about that. It's about the stuff we did from last week. So it's not going to be something that I just talked about that day. So expect the quiz to come out on the day of. So let's say, for example, next Thursday, that day, I might open it up even earlier. Instead of 4 o'clock, it'll be open up that day, the whole day and all night. You have to finish that thing off. And that's it. You're good now with Slack? You're good with Slack? Fantastic. Anyone else not good with Slack? I'm going to send Dan around. Go ahead. Dan, if you can go help him out while we're talking. So that's what we're going to be doing with quizzes this semester. And the reason why I'm doing it is because I want to make it fun. I don't want to make it so that, because I remember over the last several semesters, you come into a quiz and you're like, damn it, I have to do a damn quiz and I got to come to class. And then people will come to class, do the quiz, and leave. Right? So it didn't really accomplish what I wanted. It's really about learning. It's about every week, I want there to be some kind of takeaway. So there's some kind of thing that you take away from a learning perspective, and it keeps you on the ball in terms of the stuff we've been talking about the previous week. That's really what it's about. Labs are going to usually be a couple of days. I might give you, like, for example, the lab today is due tomorrow, right? That kind of thing. And sometimes I'll give you a lab that's due on Monday, because sometimes, you need a couple days. Maybe it's a more complex lab. It's not as big as an assignment. Don't think of it as an assignment. It's almost like a micro assignment that you have to do. I may ask you to do one task in a lab, like sign up for GitHub and put your stuff up on GitHub. That might be your task for the lab, right? It's worth 2%. All quizzes and labs are worth 2%. It's a pass-fail scenario, okay? It's not a, am I going to give you, 1.2 out of 2? It's not going to be one of those. If you did most of the lab, but if you did only half the lab, you get 1%. If you did everything, 2%. That's how it's going to be, a 1 or 2. Or a 0 if you didn't do it. It's one of those, okay? It's not going to be a, I'm not going to go through it and go, all right, did they, how good did Dan do the lab? Was Dan's lab perfect? No, it may not be perfect, but it's okay. Did he accomplish what I asked him to do? Yes, 2%. Same thing with the test. The test, 6 or 7, sometimes 10 questions max. I have to say, I want to do a disclaimer and tell you it's only going to be 5 or 6 questions. It might be 10 one day, right? But even for 10 questions, it's going to be 2%. If you do the questions and if you have open book access to everything, if you can't get perfect on your quizzes, you didn't access the right information, maybe you went a little bit too quickly, take your time. You got 10 minutes, 20 minutes, take your time. I'm not going to give you a limit on how long it takes you to do the quiz. I might give you, I don't know, half an hour, do the whole thing. So I won't give you like the whole day to do one question at a time. That doesn't make any sense. There'll have to be some kind of limit for the quiz, but you'll have all day to finish this 6 to 10 questions. All right, enough about quiz and labs. Test. What that means is our tests will only be worth 30% combined, which means that our midterm is probably going to be something like 10 or 15%. And the maximum that I can assign for my final will be like 20 if I was going to do 10% for the midterm. So expect both of them to equal to about 15% apiece on average, right? Why is this the way I want to do it? Because it won't give you a heart attack to do your midterm. It's not like you're going to go in and go, oh, damn, I got my midterm and today it's worth 25%, right? That's crazy. I don't do that kind of thing. And I don't agree with it. I think midterms are, I'm preparing you for the midterm by doing all your labs and your quizzes and your assignments. Why would I kill you on the midterm as well? The midterm, though, does prove that it's you. Dude, this is you. You're doing your stuff. I can test that it's you. And that's why it's going to be worth at least 15%. OK. Second half, we're going to be working on object-oriented programming concepts and how to use those things. Not reteaching object orientation, but how do I use classes and objects alongside with my Windows forms. Things like we're going to cover are visual inheritance, where I can create not just inheritance from a class perspective, but visually. How do I create a form and make a template with that form and then use that form to create other forms? We're going to be talking about that. Around week 11, and I'm saying around because it really depends on how good you guys are as a class. If you guys are really awesome, I might speed up a little bit and move our database piece to week 10, just letting you know. You need more time with the database piece than any other piece, okay? Because database is tricky. In the past, I've connected with Azure. We're not going to do that this time for reasons, right? Only because if you try and connect with Azure, Azure's changed, okay? Even now, the sign up for Azure, getting DreamSpark with Azure, it's not called DreamSpark anymore. You can certainly sign up with SQL database, but what's happened is there's a lot of ports that get blocked when we connect with Azure, depending on which room you're in. So in the K building, as an example, in this area here, it may or may not be able to connect with Azure and database, like SQL database. But if you're in the A building or in the B building, as an example, it may be okay, right? So to kind of go around that, we're going to be using a local DB, local database we're going to create, and we're going to be using SQL Server Management Studio to help us create tables and all that stuff. Yes. Well, yes, you could do that too, but I have to test you somehow. So when you hand in an assignment, you're going to have a database, right? So there's going to be reasons why I'm going to ask you to do a local DB. And we're going to be using our local database to connect to our app that we're making. Application, right? Windows applications, if you think about it, they're nothing without some kind of, right? So we're going to be connecting to that. There's a couple of concepts I really want to cover. I've slotted them in for the last week of class, which is week 13, link and entity framework. I'm going to try and move those concepts a little bit forward, only because in order for you to use link properly, right? Just link alone requires a day, right? To do right. If I rush, I can do link and entity framework in a day, but I won't do them justice, and I'll tell you why. Because link requires a couple of things. Lambda expressions, which are kind of advanced, right? You don't know lambda expressions, link becomes a little bit more challenging to use, right? As the idea of delegates, which we're going to be covering delegates and generics and all that kind of stuff around week 9 and 10. The great thing about this course is, because we've revamped it, some of the stuff that you're going to be learning, especially in the second half of the course, are somewhat advanced concepts that you probably haven't covered in Java yet. Like, for example, delegates. And think about delegates as anonymous functions, right? You may have covered them in Java already, an anonymous inner class, as an example in Java. Or in JavaScript, if you took JavaScript with me, you've already done anonymous functions. And I know some people were with me on JavaScript, so you've already have a feel of what they look like. Things like events, like creating events from scratch and all that kind of stuff, that's the kind of stuff we're going to do in the second half. And it's kind of more of an intermediate level knowledge you need. Those things will help you when it comes to link and the entity framework. Okay? You can't actually do link in the entity framework without understanding those concepts. Creating a generic, almost like a generic object, there's generics and collections, all those things kind of go hand in hand. We'll be covering all that, and this is kind of the meat and bones of the stuff that I really want to cover with you. The assignments, of course, are gonna basically test the stuff we're covering in class. So, for example, next week when I start talking about designing a simple web Windows form application, well, guess what? Assignment 1 is going to make you build a simple web, simple web, Windows application, so that way you can prove that you know what you're doing, right? And you're going to build on your knowledge. So assignment 1 is going to be fairly simple, like worth 10% chances are, and not too difficult to do, right? Assignment 2 is going to be a little bit more because it's going to do things with, most likely, with exception handling, input validation, other kinds of concepts as well. You're going to be using variables and strings and everything else with, so we're going to be talking about those things, those C# structures, essentials, and you're going to be using them in assignment number 2, and you're going to even need week 5 and maybe even week 6 to get assignment 2 done. So I probably have assignment 2 due by week 7. So again, assignment 1 probably due week 4. Assignment 2 most likely going to be due week 7 to give you a few weeks to get it done because it requires a little bit more work. Chances are assignment 1 and assignment 2, 10% apiece. Just telling you, because they're kind of still straightforward stuff. You're not really, there's no database connection. Now, so that means 20%. And if you look at the assignments, it's worth 50. Well, that means that leaves me with 30. Guess what? 15 for 1, assignment number 3, and 15 for assignment number 4. That's what you can expect from a split. What does this mean, however? It means that the second half of the course is a little bit more heavy in terms of weighting than the first half. All right, so, and it's to be expected because you got what, 20% for assignments, 15% test, at the most, so it's going to be like 25%, let's say 35%, plus 3 quizzes and 3 labs, which are 6% apiece, so it's another 12%. This is almost half, but not quite. It's a little bit heavier on the second half. Okay, questions around what we're doing and what the syllabus looks like, the plan for the course. This is what we're going to be doing. Okay, in the past, I have to say that we did things with VB way back in the day with Windows forms, back when C# was a younger language, right? We no longer do things with VB, chances are. Sometimes we also build forms of C++. C++ is a great language, but however, much more challenging to learn. So we've chosen C# because it's a very straightforward language, and it ties into what we're going to be doing with ASP.NET. So when you do COMP1004, and some of you have already done that with me, kind of backwards, or whatever you want to call it, right? You've kind of done that because you're kind of out of sync or whatever. What happens is this course, Rapid Application Development, ties into that course. So it helps you if you're going to do COMP1007, which is the natural progression from this course. Again, we'll be using C#. Again, we'll be using Visual Studio 2015. I think by then it'll probably be update 4. Who knows? Because it'll be probably running in the summer. So think about this as summer 2017. You're going to be doing this other course. I'm not sure. Does everyone have co-op next semester? Not this semester. Next semester. Some people might. So that's why COMP1007 is done in summer, right? So we do this course in fall, COMP1007 in summer, and they're almost identical in terms of the way we code the C# on the back end. And you'll see that. One thing we do cover on COMP1007 is MVC, Model View and Controller. We don't do that really here. This is an intro course into C# and Visual Studio and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to give you a kind of a roadmap on what we're going to be doing. Any questions around this before we continue? All right, again, I'll put up the syllabus in its entirety, and I'll make an update to this, this piece up here. It'll be later on this week. Okay. So again, if you look up online, I've got your a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation. It's like 12 slides. Why? I really want to talk about, from a concept perspective, a little bit about the .NET framework, about what we're covering, how Visual Studio and Microsoft has arranged things. I'm not going to go into detail about the history of Visual Studio and the history of C# and the history of the .NET framework. That's not what this course is about. The title of this course is Rapid Application Development. So we're not going to be talking about some of those concepts. Not because they're not good concepts to talk about, or the history. It's just that it's unnecessary. Okay, so let's bring this up. So here's the PowerPoint. I'm just using it as talking notes, okay? So again, we're going to be talking about Windows Forms. That's what this is really about, all right? There's different kinds of applications we can build. And if I was to skip around to here, I'm going to build a sample project for you very quickly so you can watch this just as a demo perspective. So I'm going to do a new project. When new project comes up, again, I'm going to choose C#, Visual C#. I have several project templates, if you will, right? Like, for example, WPF application. This is Windows Presentation Foundation. It's more of a more modern approach to building applications, but unfortunately, for the most part, we don't use it. Sometimes Microsoft might release something that is more modern. For example, they just released .NET Core. .NET Core is so new, I think like less than 1% of the population uses it right now. So about that today in our course, no, doesn't make any sense. However, if you look at things like Windows Forms applications, which is what we're going to be focusing on, that's something that is really valuable to us. Start with the console application. And the reason for it is because we always start with Java. We start with a very simple console app. We don't really go right into full-blown UI. So let's do that. So I'm going to click on console application. And again, you can follow along when you see the video at home if you want to practice. I'm going to call this COMP1004, Fall 2016, Lesson 1A. And the reason why it's just going to be 1A, B, C, because I'm doing different things. Notice that I've got a couple of things selected here. One of the things is create directory for solution, which is going to be the outside directory that I'm going to be creating. And then I'm going to do a Git repository for the solution. Now, remember, I've asked you to do Git. And if you don't know what Git is, think about it as a local. Actually, there is a hidden folder that you're going to be creating within the solution folder called .git. So you won't be able to see it. And if I'm going to show you after I create it, I'll show you where it is. And in that folder, keeps track of, or it tracks all changes to your files. So why? Why am I doing this stuff? Why are we talking about Git in the first place? Because all developers in the modern world use some kind of version control. Doesn't matter whether it's Git with GitHub or Bitbucket, or there's several other ones, Subversion, and others that we use for version control. Visual Studio Online. I have to mention the Microsoft product too, because we're using Microsoft. So we're going to click on GitHub. Now you might see, or create a new Git repository, but you might see it when you first start off, add to source control. If you've never done an application before, it may not ask you this. It may ask you to add to source control. Now, one of the things you're going to notice is because they've got Visual Studio 2015 with update 3, I might have, and if you've installed Community Edition for whatever reason, I don't recommend because you'll be missing piece parts to it. You may have a different selection than I do. I'm going to click OK. It's going to generate a console application, which has nothing to do with UI. Okay, but I want to point this out to you because I want to talk about C# a little bit. Today is a little bit of a tour of C#. We're going to go more into it over the next few weeks. But I'm going to be talking about this so you understand all the piece parts of Visual Studio. Let's look at the Solution Explorer. So when I first start Visual Studio, I have a typical menu that Microsoft gives you for every one of their Windows applications. So File, Edit, View, and so on. One of the things you can do with Visual Studio is you have a space in the middle where we're going to have our editor. So whatever you're working on, whether you're working with C#, if you want to work with C++, VB, F#, one of their other languages, for functional programming, or if you want to use things with JavaScript or HTML or whatever, all your the editors are all going to appear in the middle of your screen. Okay? You have something called the Solution Explorer, which appears usually on the right side of your screen. The Solution Explorer it details, if you look at it, the solution itself, which is this piece, and inside the solution, your project. You can have more than one project in your solution, right? Think about each of these things as a container, right? So I have my solution container, which contains the entire solution for my work, and inside I can have one or more projects. Typically, we only use one. Here's something we have. We have this program.cs file. In Java, it'd be called the .java file, program.java, right? It's a class. If I double-click on this, actually it opens up automatically. You can see that this is the structure of a default class in C#. Let me talk about this a little bit. One, the using statements. I want you to think about using statements as namespaces or packages, if you will, right? So I'm relating to Java again. So whenever I use the using keyword, using, I'm including, I'm trying not to use C++, I can include different libraries within my code, right? So I have my project. Every using statement adds weight or additional libraries that are part of the standard C# library, set of libraries into my code. That's what it does, okay? So using statements. Here I've got a few of them. I've got system.collection.generic, system.link. We're going to talk about link later on in the semester. System.text, system.threading tasks. And then we have a namespace. And notice that the namespace has the same name as my project, right? So my project is COMP1004 Fall 2016 Lesson 1A. So is my namespace. So remember, when anything that's in the same namespace has access to other classes and objects that are inside the same namespace. One thing to note is that this class is right now, it's not public. The default access modifier for all classes in C# is private when you create them. So if I want to make this public, I use the public keyword. Visual Studio has some really good features. Visual Studio 2015. Notice that my scroll bar here is pretty fat, right? You may not see this if you start off Visual Studio 2015. It might start off with a very slim scroll bar. You can change how fat or thin this is. Notice I also get a preview if I scroll through up and down, of what I'm looking at. So if I right-click here on my scroll bar and go to scroll bar options, I can certainly change the scroll bar to make it. Again, here's my source overview for my scroll bar. I can make it so it's wide or fat, or narrow or even off, right? My preview. I like keeping it about medium because I give a bit of an update. It's not too fat, but it's good enough so that I can see where I'm at. This line here tells me where I'm at in the code. So if I kind of go down to here, you can see that the line jumps down here. It tells me where I'm at in my code. And this is the code editor again. Things to note that Visual Studio is, I'll tell you right now, is the king of all IDEs. I mean, am I going to tell you that it's the best IDE out there? No, there's some great IDEs out there as well. For example, if you're programming with Java, I probably would use IntelliJ IDEA nowadays. I probably wouldn't use Eclipse. If you use Eclipse with Java is a little bit something we've been trying to get away from. NetBeans is another great IDE, and you probably use NetBeans with Java when you were doing Java. It's not bad, but I'll tell you that Visual Studio puts Eclipse and NetBeans to shame when it comes to the amount of code hinting and functionality that it has. And you know what? Goddamn should, because it has 70 million lines of code. Yeah.
So,
you can do Java with Visual Studio. Don't recommend. It's not really made for that. It's the one language it doesn't do that well, right? It'll do PHP for you. It'll do HTML, JavaScript, TypeScript. It'll do a slew of other languages, but Java, I still would use IntelliJ IDEA. Yes. Visual Studio Code is not Visual Studio. I love Visual Studio Code. It's a lightweight editor for creating web applications, right? Typically, which is what we use it for: HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript. We use the command line with Visual Studio Code, but it's much lighter than Visual Studio. Visual Studio is the monster of all applications. Visual Studio Code is the little sister of Visual Studio, right? No. Well, what code does, yes. But Visual Studio Code does things a little better when it comes to JavaScript. I'll be honest with you. I love, for JavaScript application, web applications, I really do prefer, unless I'm building an ASP.NET application, like we did last semester in COMP1007, if I'm building anything with the .NET framework, Visual Studio for now. Can I use Xamarin Studio? Yes, I can. Should I use it at this point? I probably would wait a little longer for another iteration, right? So it can be cross-platform. So if I'm going to do a Microsoft app, or if I'm going to do Microsoft websites, Visual Studio. If I'm going to do web applications, Visual Studio Code, or Atom, or other beautiful apps out there that kind of have the same thing. Like, for example, Sublime Text might be another good alternate. Still very popular. But Visual Studio Code is my favorite. OK, so again, you have with Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, code hinting. So if I hover over something, for example, if I hover over the namespace, it doesn't tell me anything. But if I hover over public or my class, my program class, it tells me that this class, it belongs to the namespace COMP1004 Fall 2016 Lesson 1A, right? And the way you access it is you say the namespace.program. But because I'm in this namespace, I can just say program. Static means, I'll ask you this question, review. Static, what does it mean? What does static mean? Hi there. as compared to if I don't have the static keyword in there. Who remembers what that means from Java? Yes.
You don't need instance of class.
And your name is? Adam. You're awesome, Adam. That's exactly the answer, right? The answer is you don't want to, hi Amanda, you don't want to, you don't need an instance of the class, which means you can use it, think about it as a container class, okay? The reason why I'm saying a container class is that I can access it without instantiating an object of that class. I don't have to, a class is a blueprint, right? Well, guess what? I can use a static class almost like as a utility class. And in this case, this is what we're doing. Our class program is a utility class that drives the rest of our code, right? It's the first entry point when we actually do any kind of C# scripting, right? So when we do C# here, and it's a compiled language, program typically is the first place we go. Does it have to be? No, it doesn't. You can make it so it's something else. You can call it whatever you like. But typically, by chance and convention, program is our first entry point. We're going to be using, when we do stuff with Visual Studio, and if I was going to build a simple C# application, the first thing is a hello world, right? We got to build a hello world. Come on, right? If you don't build hello world, something's wrong. So I'm going to use console, the console. Notice that comes up. So Visual Studio gives me code hinting on building my my executable code, right? So console dot, and then write line. Console dot write line. Console dot write line is like system.out.println. Okay, it's very similar to that. I want you to relate to, I'm trying to relate to Java for you, right? So it makes it easy. So again, if you notice, it requires, there's 19 overloads for this one. It tells you what it is, so from 1 to 19. And if I skip through here, you can see that there's different values you can put in here, because WriteLine is a method that belongs to the console class. So I'm using the static class console, which is part of our system namespace, right? Notice that the full fully qualified name is system.console, right? I could write it that way as well if I really want to. It's because I'm using this using system using statement, right? So if I write it, I could also write it like this. So system. The curly braces mean namespace. System.console, I could write it this way, right? Dot write line. And the great thing about C# is it colors the code for you so you understand where everything comes from. Notice that this is kind of grayed out. Why? Because we have our using statement in here. It's not required is what it means. If it's grayed out, it's not required. Okay? Console is the class, and it's colored in this like kind of lighter teal color. That's a class. And then write line bug or compile and build my application, right? Now this happens just like it does for Java, unless you use the javac command on the console. Who did that? Did you guys do console applications on Java, like pure console? Probably not. You probably did everything within NetBeans, right? Same thing here. We're not going to do things on the console with C#. We don't do that. We build it here. But the problem is, if I click this little play button up here, you get this. It compiles, builds, and runs, and it goes flash. Why? Because it's happening, and you know, it executes, and it stops execution, and then it closes down the console application. So to stop it from happening, we use Control F5, which is run without debugging, and you can see that the hello world does work, right? So Control F5, and if I press continue, and key to continue, it stops. So we did our hello world. Hello world. We did our first C# application. Why am I showing you this? This is about rapid application development and C#, but you need to know without knowing this, you can't. When we start doing other Windows applications, you'll be like, so what's the C# thing we talk about, right? You know C#, I'm telling you. If you know Java, if you know JavaScript, C# is not that far away. Okay, why? Because they're all C-influenced languages. If you know classic C, and I challenge you, I know some people are going to be developers, and they're going to like, I never learned C, right? Or never learned C++. Do it. Learn C. Learn C++. I recommend it. Do it for yourself. You're going to see some similarities, and I recommend C over C++ if you want kind of the same syntax across all languages, right? Take it off like that. Yeah. Bye. All right. So C influenced language. So if you know a C influenced language, then you can pick up the language. It's slightly different. You know that we need semicolons, okay? All C influenced languages pretty much require semicolons, except for, I gotta put the exceptions in there, Swift, which is the modern language from Apple, right? Swift 3 is the latest incarnation, does not require semicolons. They refuse to use them. But it's still C influenced, right? Most of them require that. Also, curly braces denote a code block, just like they do in Java. So if you see curly braces, everything that's inside the curly brace is going to be executed as part of that code block. So the main method here, this is the main method. The main method includes everything that's inside these curly braces. Okay. So syntax of C. How to run C. We're going to or C sharp. We're just going to go here. We can go here as one click start. You can also go to debug, and you can click on start debugging or F5, or start without debugging, which is what I did with, which was Control F5. Okay. We run start with debugging when we want to debug a more complex program, and we'll talk about debugging as we go. I believe it's in further down several weeks from now. We're going to be talking about more about debugging with C sharp. All right, very simple application. But hey, you know, this is really hard to write all the time. Imagine if I was going to write console write line, console write line, console write line. There's got to be shortcuts. And the great thing about Visual Studio is there's a ton of shortcuts that are built in. They're called snippets, right? So let's say I don't know how to do this, right? What you can do is you can right-click anywhere, right? And if I go Insert Snippet, which is Control-K, Control-X in sequence, right? It'll ask you, what kind of snippet do you want to put in? Well, I want to put a Visual C# snippet, obviously, right? Double click there. It can tell you kind of what I want to do. Well, here's CW, and CW, if I hover over it, is the snippet for console write line, CW. So if I double click there, I can put in the snippet. Yay. But that's really inefficient. The right way to do it was just to put the CW in, right? So if you don't know the shortcut, so if I go CW and I press tab, I get the console write line. That's the way we write stuff, okay? So if you see me doing stuff and it just pops up, it's because I'm using a code snippet. It's not because I somehow have magic and it's just happening, right? I can certainly type it. There's going to be stuff I type over and over again. But please use the code snippets. Right-click, insert snippet, and you can learn any snippet you want. An example of that, and you can probably get some of them too. Like, for example, I want to do an if statement, right? If I put if, the code snippet comes up automatically. If I press tab, it kind of writes the code block for you. So you don't have to kind of write it yourself. Hey, this is why it's called Visual C#, right? Because it allows us to create stuff with snippets. It gives you some really cool code hinting and code coloring. That's why we do things the way we do them. All right, so some really cool code snippets you can do. Again, same thing with for loops. If I go click for and then tab, bam, I got a for loop, right? So let's not do, I'm not going to go over all the syntax for for loops, by the way. This syntax is exactly like in Java, right? One thing to note is the way we declare variables. The variable declaration, the variable data types are slightly different, right? But very similar. It's not going to shock you. If you look at the variable, you're not going to say, oh my God, it's not called integer, it's called int, right? Oh, it's not called string with a capital S, it's called string with a lowercase s. And what's the difference? We'll talk about that as well. But at the end of the day, it's very similar. And when we learn languages, and you know, once we learn the concepts of one language, all we need is the syntax for another language. We don't really need to know all the intricate details about learning how to store data in variables and so on. I'm not going to cover all that stuff again in detail. I'm going to skim over it because you should know it from Java, okay? So C#. So if I want to do a loop, again, if I was going to do something like that, or an array, how do I do an array in C#? You'd be very surprised. It looks very similar to JavaScript, right? So I want to do an array of integers, right? So how would I declare this array of integers? How do I declare variables in general? Well, if you saw the example, if I went for loop, you can see that the data type is declared first and then the variable name, right? If I was going to do the same thing for an array of whatever, it would be an array of integers, right? So that's the array of integers. And then I can talk about what the array is called. For example, I want to call it numbers, right? Is equal to, and I could use something called initialization syntax with C#, and it's very similar in Java. where I can initialize the array by putting in values. So I can do something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then kind of close it off. So this is an initialization sequence. You can also do it so that you can use the new keyword if you really want to, right? A new array, a new integer array, and you can make it a fixed number. Like for example, we have 5 elements in the array, right? And you can do the same kind of declaration that you normally would with Java. But if I want to loop through the array now, I can certainly do a for each of the numbers in the array, right? So I can say for each, tab, tab. And again, notice that we have something called var. Now, you're going to say, hey, var, is that a loosely typed kind of methodology in C#? And the answer is, if you ever see var in C#, it's definitely not loosely typed. It's strict type, but it's using type inference, okay, which means it's almost like duck typing, like we did in JavaScript. It's either, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck, right? So in other words, well, for every item in the collection, my collection would be the array of numbers, right? So here's my numbers array, right? And for every item in the numbers, for every number in numbers, I want a loop and I want a console write line, right? Number, and then we can use the plus. For example, num, which would kind of print out the numbers in order, right? So var actually is a shortcut. It says, hey, if you don't really know what the type is, it's got to be an integer, right? Because it's an integer array, right? So it kind of figures out what it is. It doesn't mean that you can redeclare a number as a string later on, like you can in JavaScript. It's not loosely typed. It's not dynamic typing. If you really don't like this, and you're someone who likes strict typing, then you put int, which is perfectly fine as well. You don't have to use var if you don't want to. But if you see the var keyword, don't be afraid. Don't say, wow, C# really sucks because they use dynamic typing. No. We use it because sometimes you have a very complex variable, and trying to find out what type it is much more difficult than just putting var, right? And that's why it was created. All right, so you'll see this sometimes. Now let's say if I run this, Control F5, and if it works, if I build succeeded, you'll see number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not that difficult. This is not rocket science. It's nothing new for you guys if you're going to do this kind of stuff. Okay, so recap. If I was going to test you on this next week, hint, hint, right, for quizzes. Most classes, by default, are private, right? If I want to make the class accessible in other classes, I need to make it public by using the public keyword, access modifier. Static means I don't have to instantiate a class. I don't have to instantiate an object of the class. I can use it as a container or a utility, right? A utility class. And I can create utility methods of my program class by using the static keyword over and over again. If I want my main, though, to be exposed to the outside world, what do I need to do? Public static, right? So I go public static, and you use both those keywords. So not only can it be instantiated, or I can use it without instantiation, but it's also public, so it can be used outside of my class, my program class, all right? Public static, okay? Creating classes in C# and any other files in C#, we're going to go over this in very much more detail, but I'm going to give you an overview today. So if you really have to force yourself to do it as we go forward, if you have an idea, don't fret. Come to me, and I'll tell you how to do it. It's not that difficult, right? But if I wanted to do it just off the get-go, I right-click on my project, and I'm going to go add. And now I have a quick hit that's available here. I can add class here, but if it's not available to you here, I've added classes before. You can certainly add a new item. And if I click add new item, right, this is to the project itself. I'm right-clicking on the project, and I'm adding a new item. I can click class, and then down here, maybe I want to name my class person. This is a very simple example. So there's my person class. I'm going to click add. And what do I get? A bunch of using statements from the get-go, another file called person.cs, right? Another class. And is this class available to me right now? No, it's not. I need to make it public. I want to use items of this class, right? Here's something. If I want a constructor, because typically classes have a constructor. How do we do constructors in Java? What do I do? Let's just review. This is like Java Object-Oriented Programming 101. Come on. Anybody remember how do I do constructor in Java? Oh, I'm glad I'm refreshing your memory now. Yes? Okay, but how do I make a constructor? How do I name the constructor? Sorry? I don't have to make any variables for a constructor. Yes. Oh, name it after the class. It's got to be the name of the class, right? That's the first. So I need to make a constructor. Now, here's something. Is there a shortcut for that, right? So if I go constructor, there's a const, right? So with CST, CT. Oh, there it is. CTOR. Public person, right? A constructor. Now remember, I can have more than one constructor, right? My constructor right now is the empty constructor. It's very simple. I know people are laughing. They're like, hey, it's so dumb. It's easy. My constructor will trigger whenever I instantiate an object of the class, just like we do in Java, right? My constructor. So my person class, right now, it's the empty constructor. If I want to add properties, right? Typically, there's what we're going to do is we're going to make the object-oriented methodology tells us we need to use private instance variables or members, fields, whatever you want to call them, and public properties. What's the difference between a field and a property, right? Again, this is object-oriented programming review. Guys, you guys know what a field and a property is? I'm gonna have to ask people I know that know. Dan, what's the difference between a field and a property? I'm gonna strangle you, Dan, right? No? Field or member usually typically is it's a container, right? We contain data in the field, right? Same thing we can do that with a property too. But typically what we want to do is private instance variables or members, public properties. How we do that? We declare the private keyword. In my class, what I'm going to ask you to do is anytime we declare, we've done this before on the JavaScript side, if you've had me for JavaScript, we always use the underscore to denote private, right? So I'm going to say, let's say, for example, I want to create two private instance variables, name and age for my person, right? So here's name, right? I also have to declare the type, which is string, right? Here's my name string. And I'm also going to do private an int, let's say, which is underscore age. These are private instance variables. And whenever we do comments take the C style comment style. So C# or C influence comment style. So double // and it's going to be, let's say, private instance variables. Oh. And then this will be our constructors. These are all our constructors. Maybe we'll have more than one. Right now we only have one. I can even decorate it if you like, right? So private instance variables and constructors. I don't want to share my private instance variables with the world because of information hiding, that whole concept, yes. Not just by me, but it's definitely a style choice, right? Are they required? No. But whenever I look at other people's code and I see an underscore, guess what it means to me? Private, right? Typically. So when I look at the variable tells me a story. I want your variable names to be descriptive. And one thing that I'll be asking you to do when we do assignments is all your variable names should be contextual, right? So they shouldn't be A, B, C unless you're talking about the alphabet, right? They shouldn't be X, Y, Z unless you're talking about coordinates, right? It makes sense to do X, Y, Z if you're doing coordinates, as an example, and you're playing a video game or making a video game with Unity in C#. We can do that, right? But other than that, you don't want to use X, Y, and Z. You want to use, or even I, for your iteration, or you want to use something like for an index or a count or something to make sure that we understand what you're doing. All right, so I can also make properties, and the way we can make a property is we can declare it as a public object, right? Public object. It's got to have a name that's similar to the instance variable. So for example, name, right? We're going to surround it by curly braces. So curly braces for the property itself. Did it do it? Namespace. I love it. Didn't want that. I wanted name. There we go. So there's my name. And what I can do is I can create a getter, right? So my getter is actually a, and again, I want to kind of do public get as an example. You got to think about this for a second, what this is. I'm also going to be talking about the type that I'm going to be returning. So what do I return with my, when I do a method, when I do the program class for a second, it also tells me what I'm returning. So public static void, right? Void is what my return type, just as a review, right? So here, what I'm talking about here is public name. What am I returning for my name? Name must be a string, right? So I got to kind of put that in there as well. So string, that's what I'm returning. And actually, that's not correct. It's in my getter. Let me do that again. So public string get, which returns as a string type. I was going to build this by hand, right? So there's my public get string. And inside my getter, what I'm also going to have is a set of instructions to basically return. In my getter, I'm going to return, as an example, this dot underscore name. That's what I want to do with my getter, right? Now, it's not exactly perfect, but this is the kind of the format that we're going to kind of put everything in for getters and setters. Now I can type this all by hand. But again, there's a quick way and a nicer way to do this. If I go prop, right, for property, and I press tab, a couple things happen. One is, if I want to just go my name is equal to name, then the quick way to do it is to say public string name and then get set. And get set is the quick way of creating getters and setters, right? With and if I don't include the setter, then it's a read-only property. That's what I do, right? Or I can write them by hand. So if I was going to do that, I don't need these, right? If I want to write getters and setters a long way, and again, if you ever have a question about how to do that, we're going to cover this later in detail, but I want to show you how to do a typical class as an example. You can always look at properties in C#, right? How to write those things. And my MSDN has amazing, and I'll tell you right now that the best resource for you to learn C# is online, right? Like almost any other modern language, right? So if I want to learn about properties in C# example, you can see that I have get and set. I did it slightly differently, wrong. I was actually right the first time. And then you can include what type of property it is, and the getter and setter, instead of putting semicolons, you can expand it to include almost like a little method. It is a method. That's what they're called, get and set accessor methods. Okay, so let's do that. So I'm going to go back to here, and if I want to expand this, so instead of making it automatic, and I'll take a break in a second. I do apologize. Right? But if we go through this, and if I was going to expand this thing, you can certainly do that. So I got my get and set methods, right? And again, what I want to do with the get method is I want to have another set of curly braces in here that returns this dot underscore name, right? That's what it does for and when my set happens, what I'm going to do is again do the same kind of thing. So open close curly braces, right? And what I want to do is I want to set the name. So I want to say this dot underscore name is equal to value, which is actually a keyword, right? So value means the value that you're going to make, you're going to set to your getter and setter. Why would I want to use properties like this as opposed to just directly dealing with instance variables? One, the concept of information hiding from object-oriented programming fundamentals. The other reason is, from a debugging perspective, I have a lot more control here with my properties. These are all public properties. Public properties come under here. Right now, there's different ways of writing this thing. You might also see it written like this, so in kind of in long form. I'll write it for you so you see this as well. And the reason for this is because, again, I want you to be familiar. Now, notice that I use the keyword this, and this is a reference, right, to the class itself. Right? Why am I being explicit? I don't have to be. I recommend that you do, right? I recommend that you are explicit when you create your classes. And the reason for that is because you know that this name refers to the instance variable, right? As opposed to something else. Name, capital N, is the property that we're going to be accessing that has both a public getter and setter method. Let's do the one quickly for our integer. So I'll say public. An int, we'll call it age, capital A. And inside there, we're going to have a get method that's going to return this dot underscore age, and a set method that's going to return, that's going to assign this dot underscore age is equal to value. Getters and setters. So hey, we've got a simple class called person. You know what? My person constructor does nothing. It's an empty constructor. I could also make it so that the constructor itself takes parameters. So I could do something like, int age, or sorry, name, let's say, string. I'll do the string first, string, name, int age. And then inside there, I could certainly do something like this dot underscore blah, blah, blah. But why? If I already have my properties, I can use my properties too. So I can do something like this dot name is equal to name, right? This dot age, capital A, is equal to age, right? So that makes it so that it's not as unclear. Okay, so I've got my person, and you know what? Might as well hang up a method. Let's do some public methods. And again, from a methods perspective, we need a access modifier, public, what it returns, void, right? And the name of the method, just like you would a function in JavaScript or whatever, the name of the function. This is a named method. We're going to be talking about delegates later on, like I said before, anonymous methods that we can use later on. And let's say we're going to say says hello. That'll be our method, right? And inside our method, all we're going to do is we're going to do a console write line, right, that says the name of the person, right? So this dot name of the person, capital N, name, plus space says hello. Right? So there's our simple class. Whew. Anyone not understand what I'm doing here? Please speak up, because this is fundamental to all the stuff we're going to be doing throughout this course, right? By the way, don't worry, it's been recorded, right? Worst case scenario, right? So if you didn't catch all that stuff, or if it went too quickly for you, it's a bit of a review if you did Java, you'll have everything you need from a syntax perspective. If we cover it, we're going to cover it in more details later on in the course, but I wanted to cover it again so you understand how to do simple syntax with C# and be comfortable with it. All right, we've created our class, but I need to use it. How do I use my class? And I need to use it in my program.cs file, right? So let's just kill this stuff. I'll kill my for each statement. And I want to instantiate my class. Well, here's the great thing. Because my class is sharing the same namespace, I can just declare it as an object. So I can do something like person, I'll say Tom, is equal to a new person. And if I open the person, and if you notice, it gives me code in me that says, hey, I need a name and an age, right? So name would be Tom, and age, this is one way of doing it, would be, I'm going to make a number of 30, right? That's not true. But we're going to put a number there, right? That's one way you can do it. You can use the new keyword with the constructor notation to do it. You can also use initializer notation as well. We're going to talk about that later on in the course. So I've created a new person, and now what I want to do is tom.saysHello, which is our method, right? So something that it's not like you haven't seen this stuff before. And if I run this without debugging, and if we did everything correctly, then you should see Tom says hello. Questions? First class we did in C#, program class that drives the person class, the object that we created with our person class. And I know it's a really quick and dirty, but I wanted to give you the idea of how syntax looks in C# so you're not freaked out about it when we start doing Windows forms. Let's take a short break, and when we get back, we'll build our first Windows form, and I'll build that lab 1 for you, and I'll put it up on GitHub, okay?